Bill 1911 here. This is the Makarov IJ70-18A pistol. It's made in Russia by IMEZ, I-M-E-Z, okay? And it's imported into America by Big Bear Arms from Dallas, Texas, all right? Now, the Russians have got a different philosophy when they make guns than what we do, okay? We strive for a really good, really high quality finish on their guns. Now, the finish on this Makarov isn't bad. It's just not good, okay? If you compare the finish of this one, all right, to something like the Astra Constable, okay, there's just no comparison in the finish. This thing is smooth, it's clean, its lines are good, it's just a much better finished gun, okay? So this is the Astra Constable model. It's a little .22 long rifle pistol, and it's an exceptional gun. It really is. It's a good piece. But the finish on this, I'll tell you what, it is just spectacular. It's a beautiful little gun. When you compare it with a Makarov, it just doesn't measure up. That Makarov just does not measure up to the finish on that Astra. That Astra is a much, much nicer gun. That said, the way they function is extremely similar. The way this gun disassembles is identical to the way the Walther PPKS comes apart. With the PPKS, you pull down the trigger guard out of position. All right, if I can show you this, it's kind of hard to manipulate it like that, but you can see the trigger guard actually hinges down, and that will allow you to pull the slide all the way back, lift it up, and then take it off the frame. The Makarov has the same system. Trigger guard comes down. Now the Makarov is actually a little easier to manipulate, this trigger guard, and the reason why is it's physically a much larger trigger guard. If you can see the two, the Makarov is a lot bigger on the trigger guard. Now they do that because things are cold in Russia and they have to wear gloves. So this is much easier to manipulate. Also, since it's a little sloppy, you can actually hook it on the frame of the gun and it'll stay open for you, which makes it a lot easier to deal with. The only problem with that is you're going to develop some scratching down here on the frame if you do it that way. Now, I want to warn you that the bluing on these Russian guns is extremely thin, okay? It doesn't hold up all that well. So these things will rust in a big hurry. So you need to keep this finish on these guns oiled all the time, or you will start to see some light surface rust all over them just in a matter of days. So you need to make sure you keep the outside of this gun either oiled or siliconed. That said, let's make sure the gun is clear, and then we'll proceed. Okay, the magazine release on this one is on the bottom. It's a button that you push backward, and that releases the magazine to pull out. Okay? Magazine is empty. Okay? We're going to pull the slide back. Now this one has an external slide lock. You push up and it will lock that slide open. Okay? And it's hard to see inside the chamber of this, but it is clear. Okay? Now, one other thing about this gun is that it is extremely stiff in the recoil spring. I don't know why it has to be that stiff, but it's stiff as a board. It's difficult to pull the slide back on this thing. And like I said, the finish isn't great, so these little corners on the edge of the slide are a bit sharp. Okay? It's not the most comfortable gun in the world. It works well. It functions really well. It's a good functioning gun. But I just wish the Russians would pay a little bit more attention to finish, if they can hear me. All right, so to take the gun apart, again, we're going to pull that trigger guard down out of the way. I'm going to hook it on the frame because this one's my gun. I'm going to pull it back the rest of the way, lift up on the back of it and let that slide come forward off the gun. Okay, real easy to take it apart. Once you've got it apart, this gun is actually a very, very simple, basic gun. There's just not much to it. That's one thing the Russians are very good at, is not over-engineering things. Okay, so this has the same situation also with the recoil spring, only fits on one way. Okay, one way it fits on, it's loose. If it goes on loose like that, that's the wrong way. You got it backwards and the gun will not function properly. So when you put it back together, make sure that the tight end goes on the barrel. And you kind of have to crank it on. One way it'll twist, the other way it won't twist. It locks on the barrel, so you can only twist it one way. Twist it into place. Once it's seated all the way, the recoil spring is installed again. All right, so as is usually the case, first we're going to clean up the outside of the gun, get all the garbage out of it. Now, if you use the flannel patches that I like to use, this thing, particularly on the inside, is so rough that it will literally pull the nap out of these patches and you'll end up with flannel inside the gun. Okay, got some right there as a matter of fact. All right, so you might want to try use a different type of patch, maybe a piece of t-shirt or something like that. And this is my assistant gunsmith. He's joining us for today's presentation. Right now he's kind of showing his butt a little bit. But, yep, he runs the place. I'm only here to do the paperwork and to actually fix the guns, but he's the actual gunsmith. He has all the real genuine knowledge here. So anyway, that was Scamp. He decided to pay us a visit. Okay, a minute ago I think I've already covered this, but I'm going to say it again. Okay, if you're using, no, son, you got to stay out of that. Come on, you got to stay out of that, cat. There you go. That was my assistant gunsmith helping me again. Actually, I'm his assistant. If you're working on one of these Russian-made guns and you use a napped flannel patch like this, you're actually going to leave a lot of the fuzz off that patch in the gun because the finishes are so rough that they catch and they pull the little fibers out of the patch. So you might want to consider using a different type of material to clean the gun out. Something like an old t-shirt would work very well. But you don't want anything that has this fuzzy nap on it because it'll end up embedded in the gun. It'll be lodged in there, and that's going to soak the oil up and cause it to become gummy. So we're going to try and avoid using this type of patch. Now, I do have some other patches here, and I think that they are actually made out of t-shirt material. So we're going to try to get some of them out. And yes, these are made out of what appears to be t-shirt material. Okay, so this should work very well and shouldn't leave as many fibers inside the gun. So we're going to clean the gun. We're going to wet our patch, and we're going to use our solvent to clean all of these areas in this gun that have got garbage in them. We're going to get out everything we can without leaving that fuzz from the nap of the flannel inside of it. Okay? First thing we're going to do is we're going to get everything wet with our powder solvent. All right. And then we're going to take our little toothbrush and we're going to scrub it a little bit in some places to make sure that we're clean. down in these little nooks and crannies. We're going to get everything out that we can. So now again, I want to reiterate that this gun does function very well. It's not like it's a total piece of junk gun. It actually works great. But the finish is, again, very, very rough on this thing. So let's see what we can do to get this puppy cleaned up. All right, so we're going to clean the bore. And we're going to simply take this patch, mount it on our jag, and we're going to push it through that bore a few times. Get that bore cleaned up. All right. I'll get on there, you. Okay. Alright, now we're going to inspect the bore. Alright, so we look pretty clean. Now we're going to take another patch, a dry patch, and we're going to use that to dry the inside of the bore. Alright, we're going to flip it over and use the other side of the patch and do it a second time. Oh, forgot something. We're going to flip it over, that patch, mount it back on our jag, and we're going to do it a second time through that barrel. Okay, then we're going to inspect it again. And it looks nice and clean. Now, I'm going to show you a trick. I've showed you on other guns before, but I'll continue to show it. Alright, when you look through that barrel, it's kind of dark in there. You can't see real good. But when you put that white patch in front of it and reflect the light through the barrel, you can see a lot better. Okay, there we go. Okay. So that's how I inspect these barrels. I use something so it's kind of like a makeshift bore light, and it works very well. Okay, so once we've got it cleaned up, which we don't yet, we're going to oil it. But first, I want to make sure that I get this spring nice and clean. So what I'm going to show you is a trick for doing that. All right, I'm going to get another patch. We're going to wet our patch. Okay, we're going to fold the patch, and we're simply going to just push it through the windings like that. All right, we'll fold our patch, and then we're going to push it through the windings like this. Then we're going to pull it around so that the wire of the winding is surrounded by this patch material. Okay, to clean the spring, like I said, we're going to wrap that patch around it and just crank it through. So I already finished doing that, and this one's nice and clean. All right, now, remember we talked about earlier, this spring, if it goes on loose like this, it's wrong, and the gun will not function. It will not cycle properly, all right? It has to be really, really stiff going on, or it's not going to do the job, okay? Once you've got it all the way back up against the seat, you're done on that. Now, we're going to oil this puppy up a little bit. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get another patch, and we're going to mount it on our jag, and we're going to put gun oil on that patch. All the way around that patch. All right. So what we're going to do is put an oily patch, this oil-covered patch, we're going to put that through that barrel so we've got a nice light coat of oil inside our barrel. That's going to inhibit any rust that might want to form inside that barrel. So we put it on our jag and we can just shove it right on through. Okay. Now, I probably shouldn't have put that spring on yet, should I? That's all right. We'll get it done. Now, the other thing I'm going to do with this same patch after oiling the barrel is I'm going to use the same technique as I used to clean it, but I'm going to take that oily patch and I'm going to stick it through the windings, and I'm going to kind of squeeze it on there, and I'm going to crank it all the way from one end to the other, and that's going to oil that spring. Okay, we're going to just crank it right through like that. All right, and that's going to put a coat of oil all over that spring all the way through. I'm going to show you how I put that patch on there one more time. We're going to stuff it through the windings, we're going to wrap it around it like that, and then we're going to crank it. Crank it all the way to the other end. Okay, once we're cranked through, we're going to pull that patch out, and we've got oil at least a little bit on the outside of this spring. Okay, that'll inhibit any rust. So we're going to put it back on. Again, tight end goes first. All right. Now, I'm going to put a couple of drops of oil on the barrel itself where that spring is going to ride against it. And that's going to lubricate all of this so it slips up and down nicely. Now, we need it to move freely on that barrel. Otherwise, it's going to bind up and it's not going to recoil properly. So, we're also going to take some drops of oil and put them in all these places where we've got moving parts. Now, there's one other thing that we need to talk about, and that is when you see metal in the gun that's shiny, like right here on the hammer, you're going to need a drop of oil on that. All right, because any of these shiny spots is where wear is taking place. Okay? In other words, the metal is wearing together, and so we don't really want it to wear out. So we need to make certain that we've got oil in all those joints. Okay, now don't forget to oil springs too. You don't realize it, but the ends of them wear also. So they will end up going bad on you, and that's kind of a problem. We don't want that. All right, I think we got that. Now we're also going to do down here this magazine release. All right, there we go. So, now that we've got it oiled up, we're going to put it back together. Oh, I did forget one thing to oil, and that's on the slide. Okay. The safety catch goes through the slide, and it is a rotating piece of metal here. Okay. And so we don't want that to be a problem. So we're going to put some oil in that joint. Okay. Make sure it's oiled. Now, when you're oiling a gun, you don't want to go crazy with the oil bottle, all right? I mean, you can go way too far real quick, and you can make the gun a slippery mess. And if you do that, it's going to be a problem, all right? Now, there's one other place that we want to make sure we get some oil, and that's going to be right here on the hinge of the trigger guard, because if this freezes up, then there's no way to disassemble the gun. It just won't come apart. So you got to make sure you put some oil right there in that trigger guard on both sides, okay? Now, you're going to have some excess in there, so you're going to want to take a rag or one of your patches and clean off the oil that's on the outside of the gun, okay? Because otherwise it's going to be very, very slippery. All right. So it's time to put it back together. I'm going to pull the trigger guard back down out of the way, and on mine I'm going to hook it. And that way I don't have to fight it all the time. Once it goes through, okay. Oh, you stinker. This one is a wrestling match to put it back together. Like I said, it's extremely stiff. It's not back far enough because that trigger guard closed on me. Now we get it all the way back, push it all the way down, and then it goes forward. And then we can release that trigger guard and it's locked back together. But that is the stiffest darn gun. It's a pain in the neck to cycle it, to hand cycle it. So I'm going to clean off the outside of the gun because it is right now a little slippery. And after we're done, that's it. That's the Makarov IJ70-18A. Hey, if you've enjoyed this video, if it's been helpful to you and entertaining, please don't forget to hit the like button and by all means subscribe. And when you're done with that, come and visit us at askbill1911.com. Hi, Bill1911 here. Today I'd like to talk to you about something that's very important to us, and that's your safety. Do not attempt any of the things you see on our videos until you have thoroughly reviewed and understood our safety procedures. Also, if you're under 18 years of age, do not attempt any of these topics without the consent of your parent or guardian. Thank you.